Chapter 2860, 2860 Grandmaster Shenlai. Chapter 2860, 2860 Grandmaster Shenlai. 2860 Grandmaster Shenlai. Ling Han naturally ignored them. Yu Chengwang could only seek the help of 4th-tier heavenly venerates, but when it came to the 4th tiers, Ling Han indeed wasn't fearful. He went about selecting and opening up the stones with peace of mind, and then used great herbs to improve his cultivation level. In the eyes of everyone, he was both high-profile and low-key. What was considered keeping a high profile? Was it not high-profile of him to defeat 2 grandmasters of raw stone and kill a heavenly venerate subsequently? Moreover, every few days, he would scurry around various raw stone lanes in Culmination City, and purchase a large quantity of raw stones. But what was low-key was that Ling Han had never publicly opened up stones again, and now some people were even wondering if Ling Han had indeed won against Niu Buchuan and Bao Yufeng by virtue of his abilities, or he had just stumbled upon them by luck. Ling Han paid no heed to what other people thought as he made a fortune secretly. In this Culmination City, he stayed for more than 900 years, and the good things that he got were really amazing. However, some raw stone lanes had grown wary of him, and had put away certain raw stones that they believed to be their most valuable treasures, preventing him from having the chance to choose. Over the years, Ling Han had obtained a total of 71 heavenly venerable seals, which was extremely amazing. Although most of the heavenly venerable seals obtained were 9th grade seals, it allowed him to obtain 3 combination seals of this level, which could increase the battle prowess by 44 times, 29 times, and 13 times, respectively. At first glance, even the improvement by 44 times didn't exceed the 14th seal, but Ling Han wasn't far from completing the whole set of 9th grade seals. Once completed, the 111 heavenly venerable seals could all be combined in a series. At that time, it would be amazing indeed. Ling Han estimated that this would probably increase his battle prowess by more than 100 times, and could even surpass a 1st grade heavenly venerable seal. On the other hand, he was furiously consuming great herbs, and his cultivation level was also improving rapidly, gradually approaching the middle stage of the 2nd tier. Only the middle stage of the 2nd tier? Had all these great herbs been given to the Empress or Hu Niu, they would at least have been able to advance to another level, stepping into either the 3rd tier or 4th tier, but when it came to Ling Han, it couldn't be helped. The number of dimensions in his body was limitless, causing him to need an excessive amount of energy for every step forward in advancing to the next level. This was the path he had chosen, and he had already foreseen this day before he started taking this route. Hence, although he was a little jealous of the advancement of the Empress and Hu Niu, he did not act too hastily. His strength was steadily rising, and the solidity of his foundation caused people to exclaim it was inconceivable. However, the peaceful days had finally been interrupted. A letter of challenge was sent to Ling Han. The challenger was Grandmaster Shenlai, an extremely famous grandmaster of raw stone. The letter of challenge stated quite politely an intention to compete with Ling Han. There was no anger, appearing calm and serene instead. However, this person was the master of Niu Buchuan and Bao Fengyu. He intentionally came here to issue a challenge, so how could it just be a simple spar with Ling Han? Naturally, Ling Han wasn't afraid of competing. When it came to stone gambling, he did not fear even an elite of 7th tier. Let's compete then. He responded and accepted the challenge from Grandmaster Shenlai. When the news came out, the entire Culmination City was shaken. Grandmaster Shenlai was one of the first grandmasters of raw stones. He seemed to have a natural sensitivity to raw stones, and the success rate of stone gambling was astonishingly high. It was precisely due to this that it was impossible for a character like him to stone gamble in Culmination City. Wouldn't that cause everything to be chaotic? This kind of Grandmaster of raw stone would be working with various major forces, and his main task was to help these forces control the raw stones that they mined. Those truly valuable items would be retained by them. It was impossible for them to be allowed to flow into the market. Of course, they were truly gambling with raw stones, unlike Ling Han, who could directly see through the raw stones, so it was inevitable that there would be things that might have slipped through the cracks. However, Ling Han had been cutting open raw stones in such a way, and almost all the heavenly venerable seals obtained over the past 900 years were of the 9th grade, which was enough to clear some doubts. The oldest batch of grandmasters of raw stones really did have actual caliber and genuine knowledge. Now, such a grandmaster of raw stone was about to stone gamble with Ling Han, which naturally caused a big commotion. How many years had it been that people hadn't seen a real grandmaster make a move? The competition venue is Sever Void Lane. That's the largest raw stone lane in Culmination City, jointly operated by 7 major forces. In the past, this was where the orange-colored great herb was unearthed. Unfortunately, the most valuable treasures aren't put up for sale at all, or I would have procured them a long time ago. You can just keep on boasting. The raw stones in the treasured area can only be purchased with a heavenly venerable seal or at least a yellow-colored great herb. With your little wealth, you still want to procure those treasures. Sigh, entry to the treasure area is strictly forbidden, so what's the use of having money? Hee, I've heard that in order to facilitate the competition between the 2 grandmasters, Sever Void Lane may open up the treasure area for the 2 grandmasters to select raw stones, and even the treasures of the store can also be selected. What? Then I must go take a look. I have always wanted to know what kind of good items can be obtained from those few treasures of the store. Amidst all the discussions, Ling Han came to Sever Void Lane. He stopped at the door, feeling quite rueful. That was because he had wanted to come here before, but he hadn't expected to be rejected. He also didn't know if it had been because Sever Void Lane had been afraid of his strength and had gone so far as to especially close the shop. If he had been the only one to be kicked out, then Ling Han would definitely have lost his temper. No one would do business like this. However, the other party was too much of a ruffian. They simply closed the shop to rest and kicked everyone out, so Ling Han couldn't lose his temper even if he felt indignant. Oh, so we are not allowed to rest, is it? Now, the door here was finally open to him. Even after the stone gambling ended today, he also wouldn't leave so he could wipe out their goods. As soon as he entered the door, he saw an apprentice waiting inside. When he saw Ling Han, he immediately bowed and saluted. "Grandmaster Ling, please follow me." That was still considered polite. Ling Han nodded and followed the other party. This time, the Empress and Hu Niu still didn't come. Their personalities weren't suited for such an occasion at all. In the eyes of others, opening up a stone was a very exciting thing, but for the 2 women, it was merely a senseless waiting game, extremely boring. Therefore, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing accompanied him this time. The 3 of them followed the apprentice, and soon came to a gazebo, where they saw an old man sitting upright and 2 people standing behind him. Who else could it be but Niu Buchuan and Bao Fengyu? Needless to say, this old man had to be Grandmaster Shenlai. Grandmaster Ling agreed to compete with this old man. I am really flattered. Grandmaster Shenlai was very polite, far from being as arrogant as Niu Buchuan and Bao Fengyu. Obviously, he wasn't dazzled by the current glory, and knew that this world belonged to the strong after all, and in front of the supreme heavenly venerates, whatever celestial king or grandmaster of raw stones were nothing but trash. Now that he had shown the right attitude, the heavenly venerates would also remember his virtues, and perhaps might even let him keep his outstanding status. This was indeed what was called being seasoned and smooth. Ling Han chuckled. I've known about Grandmaster Xuanlai's reputation for a long time. Meeting with you today, you are indeed as extraordinary as your reputation. It wasn't that he deliberately flattered the other party. The grandmasters of raw stones who had risen at the beginning were indeed very good. He had heard of many cases. Hehe, you're too kind with your words. Grandmaster Shenlai laughed. This time, I invited Grandmaster Ling for stone gambling simply to compete in skills. There is no other meaning. Chapter 2861, 2861 2 wins in 3 rounds. Chapter 2861, 2861 2 wins in 3 rounds. 2861 2 wins in 3 rounds. Huh. Ling Han was a little surprised. Did this old man really just want to compete with him in skills? Grandmaster Shenlai turned his head and shouted to Bao Fengyu and Niu Buchuan behind him, quickly apologized to Grandmaster Ling now. Although the duo of Bao and Niu were not very willing, they had no choice but to bow their heads. They knelt down and said, "We have previously offended Grandmaster Ling. We hope that Grandmaster Ling will be generous and forgive us this once. The two of them spoke in such an orderly manner that it was obvious that they had discussed it a long time ago, and it was definitely not a sudden decision made by Grandmaster Shenlai. Ling Han suddenly came to his senses. Just earlier, he had said that Grandmaster Shenlai was an enlightened character. This was precisely the wisdom of the other party. Even if he were to win against Ling Han, it wouldn't matter, as he wasn't able to kill Ling Han. One day, Grandmasters of Raw Stones would retire from the stage of history, and if Ling Han was to settle accounts at that time, then who would protect them in the future? Therefore, it would be better to take this opportunity to resolve any grievances. Offend a heavenly venerate? Wouldn't that be suicidal? Ling Han nodded. Since Grandmaster Shenlai saw it so clearly and gave him enough face, he would let the duo of Niu and Bao go, as long as these two refrain from any evil schemes in the future. Okay, I'll let it pass. Ling Han waved his hand. Both Bao and Niu were upset. In fact, Ling Han didn't suffer anything at all, so why were they required to bow their heads? But since their master had asked, how could they have the right to refuse? Grandmaster Shenlai, how are we going to compete? Ling Han asked. He completely didn't pay any heed to the duo of Niu and Bao. Since Grandmaster Shenlai was the one to issue a challenge, he had naturally thought about it long ago. Therefore, after hearing such words, he smiled, and said, "Then we will use 3 raw stones to determine the outcome." Agreed. Ling Han nodded. However, we won't be using the total value of the 3 raw stones to determine the outcome, but rather each raw stone will be counted as a single round. The victor will be the one who wins 2 out of 3 rounds. How about it? That's fine. In the first round, the selection of raw stones is limited to 2 hours, while in the second round, it is limited to 6 hours, and finally in the third round, it is limited to 1 day. Ling Han couldn't help but cast another glance at Grandmaster Shenlai. This old man was skilled indeed. In 2 hours, the number of raw stones that Ling Han could explore was quite limited, and it was impossible to even know what was in the raw stones selected by Grandmaster Shenlai, which made the game really suspenseful. Not only true ability was needed, but the result also depended on luck. Ling Han nodded. That's fine. He also found it boring to always win without a doubt. Does Grandmaster Ling need to take a break, or should we start immediately? Grandmaster Shenlai asked with a smile. No need to waste time, let's start, Ling Han said casually. Agreed. Master Shenlai invited the shopkeeper of Severvoid Lane over to act as the umpire of the competition. All around, there were countless people watching. This kind of stone gambling is quite novel. I have never seen it before. It's fair. Yes. No, don't you think that Grandmaster Shenlai might have come here a long time ago, and perhaps had already explored all the raw stones here? If time is limited, it will be too unfavorable to Ling Han. Well, that's true also. Grandmaster Shenlai also listened to everyone's words, and he smiled. Since this old man have put forward so many restrictions, Grandmaster Ling can also make demands on this old man. Here, divide this place into 10 areas. Grandmaster Ling can limit the area where this old man chooses the raw stones, while Grandmaster Ling can choose any area at will. As soon as these words came out, everyone around had nothing further to say. There was no absolute fairness in this world. Grandmaster Shenlai has acted in a very transparent and righteous manner. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Okay, let's do it like this." He randomly pointed to an area, which would be Grandmaster Xuanlai's area, while he chose the adjacent area. "Are you both ready?" The shopkeeper of Severvoid Lane was a one-eyed man of broad build, a 4th-tier heavenly venerate named Fiery Silk. As a dignified 4th tier, couldn't he regrow his one eye? He obviously could, but didn't. There was a deep scar on his left eye, which was obviously intentional. Perhaps, it was to remind himself whom he had lost it to back then, and if this shame could not be erased, then he would not heal the wound and regain sight in his left eye. Both Ling Han and Master Shenlai nodded. The Fiery Silk heavenly venerate threw an hourglass, which floated in the sky, and sand began dripping. For the first round, it was only 2 hours. Ling Han didn't dare to waste time, and immediately started to move around. His current stone gambling ability has been greatly improved, and he could see the inside as long as he touched the raw stone with his hand. The speed was naturally astonishing, akin to observing the passing lights on a galloping horse, making swift judgment without stopping at all. Grandmaster Shenlai was the opposite. He would stand still and watch carefully, but once he cast a glance, he would have seen hundreds of raw stones with a single look, and he would leave after careful comparison. He was unexpectedly not much slower than Ling Han. But whether he truly saw through them, or he was just pretending, only he himself would know. Ling Han walked steadily, his face calm, but he was secretly surprised. As expected of the well-known Sever Void Lane indeed. The quality of the raw stones here was quite high. Almost 1 out of every 10 raw stones contained treasure, which was far from what the other raw stone lanes could compare to. But in fact, a large amount of treasure didn't mean that one could make money, because most of them were divine metal, and there was also a small amount of great herbs, but the quantity was extremely low, and Ling Han only saw one green-colored great herb. There wasn't anything else of higher grade than this. Was it because there were powerful characters overseeing this place that this had happened? If it was true, then such a grandmaster of raw stones ought not to be underestimated. Ling Han's footsteps were getting faster and faster. It was really difficult for him to sweep through this whole area in under 2 hours. After all, Sever Void Lane was jointly run by 6 major forces, so even though the area had been divided into 10 sections, it was still astonishingly massive. Everyone held their breath, and no one made a sound, not daring to disturb the 2 grandmasters of raw stone, or they would definitely be cast out. Yu Chengwang also came, and he sat down at one side with a haughty expression. He was also very curious about Ling Han's stone gambling ability, but it didn't matter whether Ling Han would win or Lo Seihei would never let Ling Han go. Who was he? The son of a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, there was absolutely no one who could refuse him. The Great Cloud's heavenly venerate also rushed over on purpose. There was another 4th tier beside him. He was Lung Dao, Lung Shuran's father, and kept staring at Ling Han with killing intent in his eyes. Both of them wanted to kill Ling Han, but one coveted the heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession, while the other wanted to avenge the murder of his son. The sand in the hourglass was getting less and less as the 2 hours was about to pass. Stop, the fiery silk heavenly venerate declared softly when all the sand had already emptied. Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai stopped in their tracks at the same time, and returned to their original places. Both of you, make your choice, Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate said. Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai nodded at the same time, stretched out their hands, and a raw stone flew over and fell into their hands respectively. Are you two going to cut open the stone yourselves, or let the stonecutters in this lane open up the stone for you? The Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate inquired. This old man will do it himself, Grandmaster Shenlai said. I'll open it by myself too. Understood. Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate nodded. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai stepped forward to personally open up their raw stones. Immediately, everyone involuntarily took a few steps forward, and began chatting excitedly. Now that the process of stone selection was over, they naturally were not afraid of disturbing these two people. Chapter 2862, 2862A Draw. Chapter 2862, 2862A Draw. 2862A Draw. The raw stones chosen by Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai could be said to be very different. Ling Han's piece was the size of a man, while Grandmaster Xuanlai's one was only the size of a fist, not even 1% of Ling Han's piece. Hehe, if the comparison is based on size, then Ling Han will sure win, someone joked. Shut up. He is a 2nd-tier heavenly venerate, with battle prowess that is comparable to that of a 4th tier. How can you joke about him? Someone immediately scolded him lest he brought calamity upon himself. The man froze, and didn't dare to speak any more. Everyone was looking forward to this. What kind of sparks would be produced in the fierce contest between these two people? As layers of stone scraps fall off, whether there was anything contained in the raw stone, and what it might be, would soon be revealed to the public. Gasp. As a heavenly venerate, Ling Han was naturally faster. Under his hands, the raw stone was already showing a hint of primal chaos, and a seal could be vaguely seen as churning. Heavenly venerable seal, everyone exclaimed. How awesome, obtaining a heavenly venerable seal at the very start, this already affirmed his invincible position. The fiery silk heavenly venerate's eyes also lit up as he secretly thought that it would seem that some good things had leaked into the raw stone lane despite having been browsed by a grandmaster of raw stone. Linghan stopped his hand. He couldn't open it up any further, or the heavenly venerable seal would come into being. On the other side. Yi, there's also treasure here. It's also a heavenly venerable seal. The exclamation sounded again. Unexpectedly, Grandmaster Shenlai also unveiled a heavenly venerable seal. As expected of a grandmaster of raw stone, amazing. But there were heavenly venerable seals on both sides. How to judge this? Unless these two seals would be collected into one's mind, it would be impossible to compare which one was of a higher level. The problem was, this was a heavenly venerable seal, so even if it was given to someone, who would be willing to take it out again? Besides, if that person was to take out the more widely known 7 seals to deceive them, who would know? The first round, was it considered a draw? Grandmaster Shenlai smiled. Although the heavenly venerable seals cannot be analyzed, this old man here has a complete heavens ring, which can be used for scanning to match the heavenly venerable seal to the sequence so that comparison can be made. Everyone looked at each other. Was there such a thing? You can try it. Grandmaster Shenlai took out a ring, which was engraved with seals, but it was by no means heavenly venerable seals. Grandmaster Ling, please channel a heavenly venerable seal and press this on it, he said to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, randomly channeled a 9th grade seal while holding the ring, and one of the nodes suddenly lit up. Grandmaster Shenlai glanced at it. This is a 9th grade seal. He pointed out an area on the ring. Everything that lights up here is a 9th grade seal. Grandmaster Ling, you can try again. Ling Han once again channeled another 9th grade seal, and sure enough, it still lit up in the designated area. He was curious, and said, what if it's a 7th grade seal? Here. Grandmaster Shenlai pointed to another area of the complete heavens ring. Ling Han channeled an 8th grade seal and the complete heavens ring lit up again, and it was indeed not in the area of the 9th grade, nor in the area designated by Grandmaster Shenlai just earlier. This is an 8th grade seal, Grandmaster Shenlai said with a smile. Ling Han nodded. This can indeed reflect the level of the heavenly venerable seals. Everyone was surprised. There was actually research that produced such a thing now. This is a recent invention, so it's no wonder that everyone doesn't know about it, Grandmaster Shenlai said. He first introduced which area corresponded to the symbol of the 9th grade seal, and then pressed the raw stone in his hand on the complete heavens ring. Suddenly, the complete heavens ring lit up. A 7th grade seal, everyone said. Grandmaster Ling, you try it. Grandmaster Shenlai handed the complete heavens ring to Ling Han. Ling Han took it, and pressed the raw stone on the complete heavens ring. The complete heavens ring also responded, and it lit up. It's also a 7th grade seal. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect that this still failed to distinguish who would be the winner. In the first round, it is a draw, the fiery silk heavenly venerate said. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai nodded, approving such judgment. Grandmaster Shenlai, do you still have many of such complete heavens ring? Someone asked Grandmaster Shenlai. Grandmaster Shenlai laughed loudly. Do you intend to use the complete heavens ring to select the raw stones which contain heavenly venerable seals? That is impossible, as the raw stone must be cut to the extent that only a trace of stone scrap remains and the heavenly venerable seal can be seen so that the complete heavens ring can sense it and map it accordingly. Hearing what he had said, everyone shook their head. They could already see it, so how could they cheat? However, this wasn't without its benefits. In the past, even if you saw someone else unearth a heavenly venerable seal, you could only take a gamble when rushing to procure it. Whether you might have bought a high-level or a low-level seal at a costly price would only be based on luck. But now, after mapping, one would be able to know which grade it belonged to, and even the specific sequence would be clear, so one would also be able to know whether one already owned this heavenly venerable seal. Ling Han also became very interested. He had to go get one so that he would know which seals in the sequence he was missing, and be able to connect the combination seals in a sequence. Grandmaster Ling, let's start the second round. Grandmaster Shenlai asked. All right. Ling Han nodded. It's still the same, you limit this old man to a specific area. But since it's a longer time limit this time, how about expanding it to 3 out of the 10 areas previously divided? Grandmaster Shenlai said with a smile. Ling Han agreed, and randomly assigned 3 areas to Grandmaster Shenlai, while he also chose 3 areas. This time, 6 hours, the fiery silk heavenly venerate said, and he threw out another hourglass. The two immediately began to choose. The first confrontation had allowed them to understand that the other party was a stubborn opponent, and was not easy to deal with. Everyone held their breath once again. Such an even match was indeed exciting, which made them look forward to it even more. Soon, 6 hours had passed. Stop, the fiery silk heavenly venerate said. He further added, please select your own stone respectively. Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai fetched a stone each, but this time the stones that they had selected were about the same size. Both of them chose to cut open the stone by themselves. As the stone scraps continued to peel off, the contents inside also reappeared. Great herb. Both sides have unearthed a great herb. Ling Han's is yellow-colored. Grandmaster Xuanlai's is also yellow-colored. Hiss, is this another tie? See whether one side has properties of healing. Below the orange grade, the value of great herb that heals injuries is higher. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect these two people would both unearth a yellow-colored great herb at the same time. After the great herbs had been fully extracted, they were handed over to the fiery silk heavenly venerate for evaluation. The fiery silk heavenly venerate observed carefully for a while, and said, they are both great herbs to improve one's cultivation level. He paused, and emphasized, invaluable. Ling Han and Grandmaster Shenlai took a closer look at the 2 great herbs, and they both nodded, agreeing with the conclusion of the fiery silk heavenly venerate that they were indeed great medicines for improving one's cultivation level. So, this second round came to a draw again. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Who would have thought that such a process would happen? What now? For the third round, this old man wants to enter the treasure area, and then compete to see who is better, Grandmaster Shenlai suddenly said to the fiery silk heavenly venerate. Chapter 2863, 2863 Broken Saber. Chapter 2863, 2863 Broken Saber. 2863 Broken Saber. The fiery silk heavenly venerate hesitated. There were many raw stones considered to be of high value in the treasure area, but scrap stones might also be discovered at the same time. As a result, they had not been retained internally, but placed here as a signboard to attract customers. If these two people were to take off with high-level heavenly venerable seals or an orange-grade great herb, then Sever Void Lane would sustain a great loss. He thought about it, and decided to agree nonetheless. This was an excellent opportunity to improve the store's reputation, and since they could only choose 1 raw stone each, then the loss would still be limited even if the treasure was harvested by them. Treasure area. Everyone was excited. The treasure area of Sever Void Lane had always been a reserved area, and people were rarely allowed to enter it. It was just that an orange-grade great herb had been harvested a very long time ago, and additionally, a primitive beast had also been unearthed from here. It was extremely amazing. However, everyone wasn't allowed to enter the treasure area together. Only Ling Han, Grandmaster Shenlai, and the fiery silk heavenly venerate were allowed to enter, while the others could only watch from the outside. 1 day's time. The fiery silk heavenly venerate threw out the 3rd hourglass. Neither Ling Han nor Grandmaster Shenlai wasted any time. They started immediately. As expected of Sever Void Lane, there were huge quantities of raw stones in this treasure area, arranged in a dazzling setup. Once one entered, one could feel a great aura, as if what was placed here wasn't stones, but rather time and age. Ling Han smiled. Although there was a huge quantity of raw stones here, there were only about 1,000 pieces. 1 day's time was enough for him to explore the area several times and choose the most valuable one among them. As he walked, he touched the stones one by one, but he was frowning slightly. In this majestic treasure area, there wasn't even a single heavenly venerable seal. Fuck. He stopped quickly, and tapped lightly on a raw stone. There was a great herb in it, but it was only yellow grade. He shook his head and moved on. After walking around a third of the area, he stopped again, and found another great herb. Moreover, it was of the orange grade. The orange grade was a leap from the yellow grade. The yellow-colored great herb could only improve one's cultivation level or heal injuries, but the orange grade great herb could help a heavenly venerate cast away the shackles of his cultivation level and advance towards a new height of power. To put it simply, it could help a heavenly venerate sense new fundamental powers. Therefore, the orange great herb was more precious than the heavenly venerable seal. Of course, for a 7th tier heavenly venerate, the orange great herb wouldn't have any meaning at all. Linghan didn't take the stone. If he subsequently found out that this was the most precious raw stone in the entire area, Grandmaster Shenlai wouldn't be able to snatch it from him anyway. Linghan had the battle prowess of 4th tier, which was not something which a 9th heaven celestial king could contend with. After walking for a while, Linghan stopped for the 3rd time, and had a look of surprise on his face. It was because he discovered a saber in this particular raw stone. This was a broken saber, and yet it still made Linghan feel a terrible and fierce aura despite being isolated within thick layers that could cut off even the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. Just a simple touch already caused him to have a headache. It was too scary. This was definitely a heavenly venerate tool, and had to have come from the hands of a high-level heavenly venerate to have such terrifying destructive power. Linghan believed that the value of this broken saber should be higher than that of the orange-grade great herb. This saber could only be refined by at least a 6th tier heavenly venerate, and it might even be a treasure of a 7th tier heavenly venerate, which was more amazing. He was sure that Sever Void Lane couldn't conclude the value of this raw stone, so it had been put here, otherwise they would definitely have opened it themselves. This saber had terrifying power. Linghan still didn't take it, and kept walking. This precious area was in the shape of a ring, so when Linghan walked more than half of the place, he met Grandmaster Shenlai. Grandmaster Shenlai smiled politely at him, and then passed him by. Linghan also smiled slightly. He had a good impression of this old man. After walking for a while, Linghan turned around and saw that Grandmaster Shenlai had already walked in front of the raw stone with the broken saber, and he kept looking at it with a puzzled look on his face, as if he didn't know whether to choose it or not. It seemed that the old man also felt something, but he didn't have the kind of see-through ability like Linghan, so he seemed to be conflicted. Linghan turned his head, and continued to move forward. He found a few more great herbs one after another, and even discovered a heavenly venerable seal, which made him nod in approval. The reputation of the treasure area really didn't just come out of the air, and there were indeed precious treasures here. He was suddenly taken aback, and stopped in his tracks. His hand was lying on a huge raw stone, and he could hardly believe his eyes. What he saw was completely beyond his expectation. This was too unbelievable, too amazing. Linghan took a deep breath, and walked past this raw stone. His heart was beating wildly. Should he choose this stone later? If he was to choose it, what he unveiled might be earth-shattering, but if he didn't choose it, was there any possibility for him to come here in the future? He also became conflicted, and had the same feeling as Grandmaster Shenlai. There were really many good things here, and if he could only choose one. It wasn't enough. After going a full circle, Linghan had already made up his mind. The time has come. The fiery silk heavenly venerate spoke up. In fact, both Linghan and Grandmaster Shenlai had gone round once. To them, this treasure area was still a little small, and it wouldn't take a day's time to check out the whole place. Please. Both Linghan and Grandmaster Shenlai made their moves, and things turned out as Linghan had expected. The raw stone that Grandmaster Shenlai chose was the one with the broken saber, while Linghan chose the huge raw stone that had shocked him. Grandmaster Shenlai, you go first, Linghan said. Grandmaster Shenlai did not decline, and immediately started to cut open the raw stone. After a while, boom, a murderous aura rushed towards his face. To say nothing of a 9th heaven celestial king, even the 4th tier heavenly venerate turned pale, and had an indescribable heart palpitation. The celestial tool in Grandmaster Shenlai's hand immediately fell to the ground, and his entire being also sat down on the ground, paralyzed, with cold sweat flowing down from him like a stream. Is there any peerless monster about to be born? I am a second-tier heavenly venerate, but why do I still have a feeling of fear? Everyone exclaimed. What exactly came out of this? Let me do it. The fiery silk heavenly venerate walked up. Obviously Grandmaster Shenlai was no longer able to cut open the stone. Even if he was allowed to stay there, his body might be torn to pieces by the murderous aura. One ought to know that its contents had not been truly unearthed yet. Everyone gathered together, and could only vaguely see something. This looks like a saber. Furthermore, it's a broken saber, and the breaking point is here. It is still covered by a layer of stone scrap, and the murderous aura is already so terrifying. Heavens, what is this? The fiery silk heavenly venerate's hands also trembled a little. So what if he was a fourth tier? The murderous aura of this broken saber was too strong indeed, and he couldn't control himself. But a fourth tier was a fourth tier, after all. He forcibly suppressed the palpitations in his heart, and gave it a slap. Now that it was known that a saber was hidden in it, with a murderous aura so terrifying, its grade obviously had to be far above a celestial tool, so there was no need to worry about it being smashed by the power of a heavenly venerate. The stone shattered, and a broken saber immediately appeared in front of everyone. The whole body of this saber was pitch black, and it looked like 1/3 of it was broken. If one was to look carefully, this saber wasn't naturally black, but it had been stained with too much blood, which made it appear black. As soon as the broken saber came out, at least 90% of the people went weak and collapsed onto the ground. Even the heavenly venerates were no exception. Only the fourth tier was able to stand upright, but his legs were shaking. Chapter 2864, 2864 7th tier? Chapter 2864, 2864 7th tier? 2864 7th tier? This saber was very terrifying. To be able to advance to the position of a heavenly venerate was to be a prodigy among prodigies, standing at the pinnacle of the world. But a mere broken saber could actually render those heavenly venerates with cultivation level below the fourth tier unable to stand upright. Just what kind of concept was this? Incomparable. The fiery silk heavenly venerate sighed. According to my deductions, this should be the weapon of at least a 6th tier heavenly venerate, and having consumed the blood of countless heavenly venerates, it therefore possesses such a terrifying murderous aura. Everyone nodded. Once the saber was drawn, heavenly venerates below the cultivation level of 4th tier couldn't even stand steady. How would they be able to fight? The question was, who below the 4th tier would be able to use this saber? This wasn't a confrontation with the enemy yet, but he himself was already weak in the knees and fell to the ground. Wasn't this courting death? Unless this saber takes the initiative to recognize an owner, it won't work even if a 4th tier is to wield it, a 4th tier heavenly venerate said, but his eyes were still burning. If he could solve the shortcoming of hurting oneself, this broken saber could really be of great use. The eyes of Lung Dao and the Great Cloud's heavenly venerate eyes also lit up. This saber was unearthed by Grandmaster Shenlai, so they could just ask the other party for it, and having a 4th tier open his mouth to request, even if it was a Grandmaster of raw stone, would he dare to refuse? Ling Han, do you want to continue the competition? The fiery silk heavenly venerate asked Ling Han. It seemed that there was no suspense anymore. A broken saber even suppressed the 4th tier heavenly venerate, which even a heavenly venerable seal could not compare with by far. Ling Han smiled faintly. Of course. It wasn't that he didn't know the horror of this broken saber. In fact, Grandmaster Shenlai could at most guess that the thing hidden in this raw stone might be shocking, but he absolutely didn't know what it was. But Ling Han clearly knew it, but still didn't choose the raw stone. What did this mean? Ling Han began to cut into his stone carefully, as if there was a heavenly venerable seal hidden in it. Every person present shook their head. This time, let alone a heavenly venerable seal, even an orange-colored great herb would be useless, as it couldn't be compared to this broken saber. But Ling Han was not only extremely slow, but he actually cut a huge raw stone into a human shape. Everyone couldn't help bearing weird expressions. Did he think that a person would really pop out of it if he was to cut it into a human shape? Ling Han's hands were trembling a little. Others didn't feel it at all, but he was under a lot of pressure. He didn't dare to make a wrong cut, otherwise he might suffer a violent backlash if he touched the thing inside, and he might even be killed from the shockwave. Therefore, he had to scan with his divine sense to clearly understand the situation inside. But when his divine sense encountered that thing, he was under tremendous pressure. Even though he possessed the battle prowess of a 4th tier, it was still quite unbearable for him. His hands became slower and slower, and layers of sweat fell from his forehead. Some people lost their patience, thinking that Ling Han was deliberately delaying because he had definitely lost. Can it be opened or not? It's pointless to delay it like this, why don't you just admit defeat? That's right, this time it's just a competition, and there's no disadvantage to you even if you lose. However, 4th tier elites such as the Fiery Silk Heavenly Venerate looked solemn. If the other, Lin Yolian, was to come, then together with Ling Han, the current 4 great prodigies would have all gathered together. The 7th tier is immortal and cannot be eradicated. He can only be suppressed and not killed. Wu Haoyang walked over, only 9 meters away from the ancient corpse, and said, if it weren't for this, hysteria would have already attacked. A 7th tier couldn't die, but currently the Heavenly Venerate in black dragon robes was already dead, which could only mean that this person wasn't a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate. Weird. Shin Chihu suddenly frowned. Weird indeed. A beautiful voice sounded, and a stunning woman walked over elegantly, and similarly stood at the same place 9 meters away from the ancient corpse. Lin Yolian. Chapter 2865, 2865 Contend. Chapter 2865, 2865 Contend. 2865 Contend. Everyone was astounded. The 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity had actually appeared in Culmination City, and they had all moved for the sake of this ancient corpse, appearing at the same time. It was proof enough to show just how astonishing this ancient corpse was. You can already see what's strange about this. Shin Chihu looked towards Lin Yolian. There was no one worthy of his notice. Aside from Lin Yolian, the only person that he would barely consider a rival was Wu Haoyang, and as for others? Even 4th tiers were trash to him. Lin Yolian nodded. Theoretically, a 7th tier would not die or be destroyed, but the feeling this ancient corpse gives me is no different than how my father feels. That is indeed so. Wu Haoyang nodded as well. This man was definitely a 7th tier when he was alive, and even after death, he still has such tremendously terrifying pressure. I can guarantee that even if a 6th tier touches his body, their arm will be severed, at the very least. However, how could this be possible? Shin Chihu frowned. It was also he who had previously said that this definitely could not be the corpse of a 7th tier, because a 7th tier could not possibly die. This was a contradiction. However, no matter how they looked at it, this ancient corpse should indeed be a 7th tier. This was truly baffling. Moreover, Lin Yolian paused slightly, and then continued, there has never been news of a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate dying in all of history. If this was a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate, then what primitive era would he have to have existed in? This person's history may be countless times further and more extensive than we could possibly imagine, Wu Haoyang agreed. As these 3 people conversed, there was not one among the bystanders that had the right to interrupt. Even those 4th tier Heavenly Venerates could only listen at the side. They were the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity, and their battle prowess was at least at the 5th tier. This matter is too serious. We might have to ask the elders to come and take a look for themselves, Shin Chihu said. Lin Yolian nodded, and then turned to look towards Ling Han. Brother Ling, could you hand this ancient corpse over to us? Ling Han did not mind. Even he could not approach this ancient corpse. It would definitely blow up his body. He gave a gesture of invitation, and said, please go ahead. Shin Chihu looked towards Ling Han, and asked, so you are Ling Han? Ling Han merely smiled slightly. He did not know what Shin Chihu's attitude towards him was, so there was no rush to show anything, either. Not bad, not bad. I think that you should spend some more effort on stone gambling, Shin Chihu said. I heard that Grandmasters of Raw Stone also have the ability of finding veins of ore, so would you like to come and give me a hand? He was saying this with a smile, and looked like he was joking, But if the other party wanted to take it seriously, then it seemed like he was being serious as well. Ling Han looked at Xin Qihu, also smiling, and asked, "Do you want to learn? I can take you as my disciple." He had been counter-checked. It seemed like Ling Han, too, was joking, but if Xin Qihu wanted to take him seriously, the former's words could also be taken seriously. They implied, "You want to take me in as your lackey? I will directly become your master, and be your senior." Xin Qihu faltered slightly. He had not expected that Ling Han would really dare to say this, daring to fire a retort back at him, the greatest prodigy of all eternity. But if he really wanted to flip out, there did not seem like there was anyone that could be his target. It was he who had first spoken half-jokingly. How could it be that Ling Han could not respond with a joke himself then? "I will remember you." Xin Qihu smiled, his eyes bright, exuding a frightening pressure. Ling Han was not the type that was willing to be bullied. He was just about to retort, but Lin Yolian stretched out a hand in front of him, stopping the words he was just about to say. This exquisite beauty said, "Brother Xin, Brother Wu, we should quickly get going and pay a visit to the realm battlefield." "All right." Xin Qihu nodded. He knew that Lin Yolian was deliberately trying to play mediator here. He could refuse to give face to others, but when it came to Lin Yolian, he definitely had to give her some face. Wu Haoyang glanced longer at Ling Han, and said, "Ling Han, your progress is too slow. How can you be worthy of fighting me like this? I have only lost to you alone in a battle of equal cultivation level. I definitely do not permit myself to eternally bear this kind of humiliation." He was no despicable character, and was very broad-minded, relating this part of his history in full public. What? Wu Haoyang has lost to Ling Han in the past? This is too inconceivable. He is the greatest prodigy of all eternity. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, Wu Haoyang actually lost. However, Wu Haoyang is presently in the 4th tier, but Ling Han is only in the 2nd tier. This is enough to show the difference. That's true. A moment of strength does not mean eternal strength. He is already no longer worthy of being considered Wu Haoyang's equal. Wu Haoyang is truly broad-minded, not caring in the slightest to speak of how he has previously lost in public. He has truly lived up to his name of being the greatest prodigy of all eternity. Everyone was conversing spiritedly, all of them praising Wu Haoyang. Ling Han was unconcerned, and said calmly, "You can suppress your cultivation level, and we can have another battle of equal cultivation level. Maybe some other day," Wu Haoyang said smilingly. He pointed at that ancient corpse. "I don't have the time now." Ling Han nodded, and replied, "All right." In a battle of equal cultivation level, whom would he have to fear? He could thrash even a 7th tier heavenly venerate. Even if Lin Yolian and the others had extremely astonishing strength, they still had to carefully take out a layer of stones, which they heaped on this ancient corpse. After piling layer upon layer, that terrifying pressure gradually lessened at last. But the layers of stone could not compare with actual raw stone. Hence, in the end, the 3 of them heaved the ancient corpse, which was looking like a small hill, and left. Even so, there was still astonishing pressure seeping out of the corpse shroud, causing everyone they passed to involuntarily sprawl out on the ground. Not until Lin Yolian and the others finally vanished from sight did everyone finally sigh in relief. This corpse was really too terrifying. "Grandmaster Ling, this old man admits defeat." Grandmaster Shenlai smiled. With a toss, he threw out 2 things, and they were both wrapped in a layer of stone. Ling Han knew that this was the heavenly venerable seal and great herb that he had previously unearthed. He was slightly surprised. Previously, they had made no agreement that the winner would take all. Grandmaster Shenlai was deliberately showing him a gesture of goodwill. Upon further thought, Grandmaster Shenlai was actually just a celestial king, so what use would he have for this great herb or heavenly venerable seal? In any case, he would have to give them over to some heavenly venerate, so why couldn't he just pass them on to Ling Han? It should be known that Ling Han had boundless potential, and his future accomplishments were immeasurable. Ling Han nodded at Grandmaster Shenlai and smiled, indicating that he accepted his kindness. "Please also deal with this broken saber on my behalf, Grandmaster Ling." Grandmaster Shenlai stayed benevolent until the end, and gifted that broken saber to Ling Han as well. In any case, he couldn't even draw near to it. Grandmaster Shenlai, this is a supreme treasure. Don't you think that is too rash? The great clouds heavenly venerate immediately said. That's right, this is a rare supreme treasure, so it would be better to deal with it after much serious consideration first, Lung Dao said as well. Grandmaster Shenlai was incredibly slick and smooth. How could he possibly make enemies of any heavenly venerate? He hurriedly smiled, and said, "My lords, your words have come a little too late. This old man has already gifted the broken saber to Grandmaster Ling. If you desire it, please seek Grandmaster Ling. It is no longer any business of this old man. Fengyu, Buchuan, we should leave." The old geezer really left, without even turning back, as if there were flames licking at his heels. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. This old geezer was actually quite interesting. "Ling Han, this broken saber was unearthed at our lane. Give me some face, and we will buy it from you, all right?" the fiery silk heavenly venerate said to Ling Han. It was extremely possible that this broken saber was the precious tool of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, and this had boundless significance. Chapter 2866, 2866 I'm not giving anyone face. Chapter 2866, 2866 I'm not giving anyone face. 2866 I'm not giving anyone face. Ling Han, it would be better to pass it to me. The great clouds heavenly venerate spoke up as well. In return, I will allow you to choose any 10 raw stones in our raw stone lane as compensation. Hearing these words, everyone couldn't help but scoff secretly. So stingy. Could the value of 10 raw stones compare to the value of this broken saber? He was completely just planning to gain something without risking anything of his own. Ling Han rolled his eyes at him. He had already made a clean sweep of that raw stone lane long ago. To say nothing of 10 pieces, even 100 or 1,000 raw stones would not be able to reveal anything valuable. You can just keep on dreaming. Ling Han, you should consider carefully, Lung Dao also advised, his words filled with threat. Ling Han glanced at him. I hate you too. If either of you speak any further, I will definitely kill him. Would you believe me? The great clouds heavenly venerate and Lung Dao instinctively wanted to say no, but when they spotted the killing intent that was hidden under Ling Han's calm features, they swallowed the words that were just at the tip of their tongue. They both humphed. What meaning was there for dignified heavenly venerates to just argue verbally? When Ling Han exited the city, they could just kill and rob him. The reason why the great clouds heavenly venerate had previously not moved was because he felt that he alone was not enough of a guarantee to kill Ling Han, so he wanted to wait for Lung Dao to arrive. Ling Han glanced at the fiery silk heavenly venerate again. The latter had been quite polite, so he smiled slightly. Apologies, I myself am also quite interested in this saber. The fiery silk heavenly venerate's gaze flickered. Since he was able to become the shopkeeper of Sever Void Lane, and oversee this place, his strength definitely surpassed the average of 4th tier. However, should he move now and suppress Ling Han? He was wary. Firstly, this was in full public, and if he made a move to snatch the item forcefully, the matter of Sever Void Lane bullying their customers would spread out. In the future, who would still come to choose raw stones here? Wouldn't they be afraid that if they unearthed anything valuable, it would be forcefully snatched from them as well? By then, with several dozen 6th-tier heavenly venerates simultaneously interrogating him, how was he supposed to explain? Secondly, Ling Han was not an ordinary 2nd tier, his battle prowess was comparable to a 4th tier's. If they fought, it would definitely cause tremendous damage to Culmination City, and the fiery silk would not be able to bear the consequences for such actions, either. Hence, after further consideration, he nodded slowly. In that case, Friend Ling has to be careful. These words seemed both like a threat and a reminder because it was not just he alone who had designs on that broken saber. Furthermore, there were at least 2 heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession as well, and he had even more great herbs. Who did not want to obtain them? Ling Han merely smiled, then turned, and left. Wait. A voice suddenly rang out, appearing very abrupt. Everyone looked over, and couldn't help but feel surprised, because the speaker was actually a celestial king. A mere celestial king actually dared to speak up in these circumstances? Had his head been kicked silly by a donkey? Yet this celestial king's expression was filled with arrogance as he declared, "My young master has said that he wants this broken saber. No one is to touch it. Otherwise, when my young master returns, whoever has taken this saber, my young master will seek them out and demand it from them." Hiss, what bold words! Who is your young master then? Even those aggressive people like Yu Chengwang felt an uncontrollable urge to beat someone up. Fuck, the celestial king was actually even more arrogant than him. Was he trying to steal his limelight here? "My young master," that celestial king said slowly, extremely calm and steady, "is Shin Chihu, Lord Shin." When these words fell, a dead silence fell over the area. Who was Shin Chihu? He was the greatest prodigy of all eternity, and though he had been stuck in the 4th tier for many years already, it was certain that his battle prowess had to be at the 5th tier, at least. Furthermore, his old man was a 7th tier heavenly venerate, an indestructible, immortal, terrifying existence. Even if his old man was set aside, and it was him alone, how many people in this world could afford to offend him? Thus, when Shin Chihu's name was heard, everyone fell silent, and even Yu Chengwang gave up his intentions to compete. It could not be helped, he really could not compete. That celestial king's expression was filled with pride. His master had that kind of intimidation. He had already witnessed this kind of scene a considerable number of times, and who would dare to disobey his command? Ling Han moved, and piled those layers of stone on the broken saber. Otherwise, even he would have to suffer some effects, and this could not be used to intimidate an opponent at all, because once the saber was exposed, and he was the nearest, the effects on him naturally would be the most severe. Very good, you are very proactive. When the celestial king saw how Ling Han had taken the initiative to wrap the broken saber, he couldn't help but nod, a smile appearing on his face. The action of commanding a heavenly venerate made him feel an indescribable feeling of superiority. He did not need to become a heavenly venerate himself, but could still command a heavenly venerate. This was too fun. Very soon, Ling Han had concealed the broken saber completely, wrapping a thick layer of stone around it. Then, he picked it up. He attempted to stow it away into his spatial tool, but before he had managed to stow it in, it had already destroyed the spatial tool. He shook his head. From the look of things, the only thing he could do was hold it. "Bring it over here quickly," the celestial king harshly shouted when he saw how Ling Han was moving slowly. Ling Han glanced at him, and strode over. When everyone saw this, they all shook their head. Sigh, even someone as strong as Ling Han had to bow his head in submission. Shin Chihu was too powerful. With this kind of authority, TSK, even just his subordinate could be so domineering and overbearing. Seeing Ling Han approach, that celestial king couldn't help but reveal a proud grin. "Heavenly venerate." P2E. Ling Han had already drawn near, and that celestial king very naturally extended his hand, wanting to take the broken saber from him. "Pa." Ling Han moved, and delivered a slap right at him. That celestial king's eyes immediately bulged. He had never imagined that Ling Han would, and actually dared to, make a move on him, but how could he possibly be capable of sustaining the blow of a heavenly venerate? He did not even manage to counter, and he had already been blown up, turning into a fountain of blood. Ling Han very carelessly flicked his hand, as if he was swiping off some dirt that was on his hand. Quite a number of people were gaping, appearing extremely shocked. That was Shin Chihu's servant. Though his individual strength was not even worth mentioning, killing him was in fact equivalent to slapping Shin Chihu. This would become a huge problem. But there were also a number of people who were pleased. A mere celestial king actually dared to order around a heavenly venerate. This was a reasonable kill. Ling Han turned and left. Since he had killed the celestial king, that was it. Was there any need to take it to heart? As for Shin Chihu, sooner or later, he would battle the latter. Everyone saw him off. Some looked impressed and admiring, while some sneered, delighting in his misfortune. There were some that had soaring killing intent, and were waiting for a chance to make a move. Ling Han, Ling Shi, and Fu Tianxing went to find Hu Niu and the Empress, and they decided to return to base after reuniting with them. They had already stayed here for more than 900 years, and had already unearthed more or less all the valuable raw stones here. Furthermore, after this competition, Ling Han was probably going to become the least welcomed customer of every raw stone lane here. It was already impossible for him to want to get rich secretly. Hence, there was not much meaning left in continuing to stay here. Moreover, Ling Han also wanted Ju Hang and the others to help him take a look at this broken saber to see if they could think of some way to make it so that it would not have any effect on the user. If that was possible, the significance of the saber would be much greater. They set out, exiting Culmination City, and turned back around to head to base. But clearly, it would not be so easy for them to leave. Not long after exiting the city, they spotted a man that was sitting in the distance. There weren't any plants here, so there was nothing keeping the soil rooted. Dirt and sand fluttered in the air, seemingly like a desert. In this kind of place, there was a chair. Aside from deliberately posturing, what other significance would there be? This show-off was Yu Chengwang. Ling Han, do you think you can leave so easily without my permission? He said in a disdainful tone. Chapter 2867, 2867 Weakest Link. Chapter 2867, 2867 Weakest Link. 2867 Weakest Link. Ling Han glanced at him. Where are your lackeys? Let them come out. Ling Han, someone shouted immediately, and walked out from the surging yellow sand. It was the Purple Flame's Heavenly Venerate. He was just a member of the Yu clan's alliance, an alliance and not anyone's subordinate. He was a dignified Heavenly Venerate, and a fourth-tier cultivator at that. How could he possibly be under someone else's command? The reason why he would take action under Yu Chengwang's instigation was naturally the treasures in Ling Han's possession. That broken saber, the peerless great herbs, and the heavenly venerable seals were all too attractive. Out of the mouth comes misfortune. This is an old saying, and it contains the truth, but there are people who haven't suffered enough. The Four Sides Heavenly Venerate also came out of the yellow sand, and his face was now filled with bitterness and sorrow. There is nothing left to be said, kill him. The highest North Heavenly Venerate also appeared, and stood behind Ling Han to prevent him from escaping. When he went to see Ling Han that day, his face was full of amiability, which made people feel that he was very easy to get along with, but now his face was filled with killing intent, which made people shudder. The Six Heavens Heavenly Venerate and Grey Space Heavenly Venerate also appeared on the left and right, respectively, similarly full of killing intent. In this instant, 5 fourth-tier Heavenly Venerates had actually joined forces to surround and attack Ling Han. Ling Han remained unfazed, turned his head, and said, "All of you, go into hiding first. I'll get rid of the trash first." The Empress and the others nodded, and entered the celestial guest residence one after another. Such an arrogant tone, said the Four Sides Heavenly Venerate, his face filled with anger, and it was obvious that he had switched expressions. No matter how freakish you are, you're merely a second tier, the highest North Heavenly Venerate said disdainfully. My lords, please act together to suppress this brat, Yu Chengwang urged. Although he was the son of a sixth tier, he had to maintain absolute respect when facing fourth tiers. At the level of Heavenly Venerable tier, the hierarchy of the levels became even stricter. All right, we can avoid future troubles. The Grey Space Heavenly Venerate nodded, and took the initiative to attack. As he made the move, the other Heavenly Venerates moved as well. The 5 great elites launched attacks together towards Ling Han to suppress him. Boom! The attacks of the fourth tiers were too terrifying. The space here was already unstable, and the earth immediately crumbled, creating an extremely frightening scene, as if the entire dimension was about to collapse. If these attacks took place in the Flaming Frost realm, it would be absolutely impossible to cause such an effect, as the power of the heaven and earth would balance and suppress it in order to maintain the stability of the dimension. However, this dimension was already dead. Rather than calling it a dimension, it would be more accurate to describe it as a huge piece of barren land that couldn't breed any vitality, because this dimension itself was dead and absolutely devoid of vitality to begin with. The destructive power of a Heavenly Venerate could be infinitely magnified here, and the horror of it was indescribable. Ling Han humphed coldly. "You're seeking death." His body moved, and appeared in front of the highest North Heavenly Venerate, throwing out a punch. You're overestimating your abilities. The highest North Heavenly Venerate sneered, maintaining his original attack. Peng. The highest North Heavenly Venerate was immediately sent flying. He was actually no match for Ling Han at all. Ling Han charged forward through this gap, and chased after the highest North Heavenly Venerate, barraging him violently. Peng, peng, peng. His punches became faster and faster. The infinite power of dimension burst forth from within his body, and densely packed seals flickered on his skull, interweaving together into one piece. As he struck with the fists of fury, he unleashed his full battle prowess. This time, Ling Han was channeling the 9th grade combination seals, which boosted his power by 44 times, causing his battle prowess to be extremely terrifying. Not good. The highest North Heavenly Venerate couldn't help being shocked. Although Ling Han was only channeling 9th grade seals, which he himself had mastered a few of, the boost in power the latter enjoyed was only 4 or 5 times, but the effect was completely different when it was channeled in Ling Han's hands. Combination seals, the highest North exclaimed. Dozens of 9th grade seals were superimposed together, and their effect would reach the level of 5th grade, surpassing any high-level seals that he had mastered. The highest North Heavenly Venerate tried his best to block the attacks, but he was no match for Ling Han's power at all. He was being knocked back again and again. The highest North retreated, but Ling Han chased him down and kept attacking, while the Grey Space Heavenly Venerate and the other great elites were several positions behind, and were actually unable to catch up no matter what. This was too appalling. It was clearly the 5 great elites that had besieged Ling Han alone, but now the situation was forcibly turned into a one-on-one battle. And the result of a one-on-one battle was that the highest North Heavenly Venerate was outmatched. The Grey Space Heavenly Venerate and the other 3 were both anxious and shocked. If Ling Han was to finish off the highest North Heavenly Venerate first, that would be equivalent to breaking one of their links, and it also meant that Ling Han could still crush them one by one. Therefore, they had to stop Ling Han. Otherwise, it would deal a devastating blow to their confidence. The highest North Heavenly Venerate naturally knew this too, and he was being drawn into the eye of the storm, which left him no room for retreat, so he could only grit his teeth and persevere. Peng, peng, peng. However, Ling Han's explosive power was too terrifying. Ling Han's strength wasn't inferior to the highest North's to begin with, and now with a strength boost of 44 times, in addition to the power of the Heavenly Venerate technique that he had cultivated, the power of his strikes really caused his opponent to complain unceasingly. How could a mere second tier be strong to this extent? Blood flowed from the corner of the highest North's mouth, but he forcibly suppressed it, and didn't spit it out directly from his throat. Further, his complexion was even more hilarious. It was red at one instance, and then white in the next instance, being even more changeable than that of the 4 sides Heavenly Venerate. Crack, crack, crack. The violent sound of bones breaking could be heard continuously. Despite the highest North Heavenly Venerate's body being tempered by the fundamental power, under such a fierce attack, there was still breakage. He hastily took out a cyan great herb, and just bit off a leaf and consumed it without even looking at it. In the midst of a fierce battle, there was no time for the highest North Heavenly Venerate to recover slowly, and he could only consume a precious leaf of a great herb. The effect was obvious. His Heavenly Venerate bones were healing, and even showing signs of becoming stronger within a short period of time. This was just the healing of a cyan great herb. If it had been green or yellow, it would definitely have been even more impressive and awesome. How dare you eat my precious medicine? Spit it out. Ling Han was furious, and he struck with fists of fury even more rapidly. The highest North Heavenly Venerate was taken aback for a moment. What has my consumption of my own great herb anything to do with you? However, he suddenly realized that Ling Han already regarded him as a dead person, so everything on him naturally became Ling Han's. Thinking that way, wasn't he just consuming Ling Han's great herb? Damn, Ling Han was too hateful. The highest North Heavenly Venerate screamed. Ever since he had become a Heavenly Venerate, he had never lost his composure like this, but now he was being infuriated to the extreme by Ling Han. And yet he could only keep retreating despite being furious. Oh, How much he wanted to reunite with the Grey Space Heavenly Venerate and the others, so they could combine the power of 5 people to suppress Ling Han. However, Ling Han didn't give the Highest North this chance at all, simply targeting him and fiercely beating him up, so much so that he could only be continuously sent flying. While the Grey Space Heavenly Venerate and the others were not far away, the distance remained fixed, and they were unable to get any closer. The Highest North Heavenly Venerate also became ruthless. If worse came to worst, he would just consume all of this great herb, and he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to survive Ling Han's burst of power. The Heavenly Venerable Seals could only release energy for a maximum of 2 hours, regardless of whether it was a single seal or combination seals. At that time, to say nothing of the joint forces of the Grey Space Heavenly Venerate and the others, even the Highest North Heavenly Venerate himself wouldn't need to be afraid of Ling Han. It was just that Ling Han's punches were too overbearing. After a while, the Highest North Heavenly Venerate had to bite off another leaf and consume it. The bones in his arm had already been severely broken, so he had no choice but to take the medicine. Ling Han burst into anger, while his fists struck with greater and greater speed. The Highest North Heavenly Venerate could only keep on taking medicine as he had to survive this most dangerous period. Chapter 2868, 2868 Killing them all. Chapter 2868, 2868 Killing them all. 2868 Killing them all. The Highest North Heavenly Venerate was running out of great herbs. There were only 7 leaves on this great herb, and he had finished every one of them. He had to resort to eating the stem now. Even though the effectiveness was not any weaker compared to the leaves, he could only get 7 to 8 bites of it. A sense of doubt rose in the Highest North Heavenly Venerate's mind. Could he endure until the end of Ling Han's power burst? He definitely could. He pushed the negative emotions to the back of his mind as quickly as they came up. How could one who could become a Heavenly Venerate not have this much toughness? With the exception of a never-before-seen prodigy like Shin Chihu, everyone had to encounter tons of setbacks and pitfalls on their path to becoming a Heavenly Venerate. If he hadn't had at least this much tenacity, he would have long perished on his journey to becoming a Heavenly Venerate. He tried his best to hold on, relentlessly swallowing the great herb while calculating the time. 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. He revealed an expression of joy. He could still barely use the great herb in his hand one more time, while Ling Han's burst of power had ended. Ha ha ha. Brat, it's your turn to suffer. The Purple Flame's Heavenly Venerate also displayed a cold smile filled with killing intent. Ling Han was already at his limit. This time, it was their turn to beat the shit out of this brat. Ling Han did not falter. Boom. An even more shocking power erupted from his body, raising his battle prowess by yet another level. What? Another combination seal? The Highest North Heavenly Venerate was shocked. Ling Han's skull, pelvis, arms, and legs were shining with the light of a seal. This was definitely another combination seal. This time, the Highest North had the urge to vomit blood literally. A sense of despair crept up inside him. Heavenly Venerable seals were rare beyond compare. Barring the 7 more widely known seals, trying to obtain even one of them was incredibly difficult. And if even getting one of them was this hard, what more of obtaining such a combination seal? However, not only did Ling Han have combination seals, he also had more than one set. Knowing this, how could the Highest North Heavenly Venerable not want to vomit blood? How could he not despair? How could he possibly hold on? The Highest North Heavenly Venerate was a tough man, but the great herb in his hands was completely spent. It was impossible to make bricks without straws. How was he supposed to endure any longer? He took his final portion of the great herb, and then roared as he launched a desperate attack. As a 4th-tier Heavenly Venerate, he was not short of decisiveness. Since there was no path to retreat, he had to kill his way out. He aggressively pressed forward, turning defense into offense. Only by pushing Ling Han back, or at the very least making him ease up on his attacks, would he have the chance to regroup with the Grey Space Heavenly Venerate and the rest. For the sake of survival, he gave it his all. Ling Han had a calm look on his face. Why would he give the tiger a chance to return to the mountains? Kill. He continued with his fierce onslaught. Using the astonishing power of the four direction seals, he sent the highest north heavenly venerate flying into the distance with a single punch, not showing any signs of stopping at all. Peng! 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 The highest north heavenly venerate was truly in despair. He could feel the organs inside his body seething. They were close to bursting. How strong was the body of a heavenly venerate? It was tempered with the fundamental powers of the Genesis world, and was many times stronger than divine metal. Each ascension brought it closer in strength to the level of a heavenly venerate tool. But now, he was being beaten into submission by Ling Han. He was frustrated, enraged, and indignant. However, there was nothing he could do to turn this unfavorable, losing situation around. His chances of survival were slim. A cold glint flashed in Ling Han's eyes. Peng! He struck out with his fist, straight into the highest north heavenly venerate's temple, directly blowing this heavenly venerate's mind to bits. So what if he was a heavenly venerate? Unless he managed to release his spirit ahead of time, a complete destruction of his mind would result in absolute death. The highest north heavenly venerate had died. At that moment, the purple flames heavenly venerate and the rest stopped in their tracks. The highest north heavenly venerate was famous as them, and their strength was more or less the same. They had fought, both on the same side and on opposing ends, for many epochs. But now, the highest north heavenly venerate had been killed right before their eyes. They didn't even have the chance to save him. This gave them chills down their spine, and they felt a sense of nervousness from the depths of their soul. Would they also meet a similar end? However, no heavenly venerate was that fragile. The four of them immediately rekindled their fighting spirit, and charged at Ling Han. Ling Han did not shy away from the challenge, and met the four of them head-on. Is this brat courting death? The purple flames heavenly venerate and the rest didn't understand, but they did not care, either. All they wanted was Ling Han's death. Kill, kill, kill. Just as their attacks were about to land, Ling Han revealed a mysterious smile. With a wave of his right hand, he threw out the thing hanging on his back. As the stone sheath unwrapped itself, a broken saber was revealed. Wang. Immediately, a terrifying, murderous aura surged forth. What? Not good. The purple flames heavenly venerate and the rest were shocked. As they were assaulted by this wave of murderous aura, their battle prowess instantly fell. They had to focus a lot of their effort to resist it. Otherwise, they might not even be able to stand firm. Ling Han chuckled, and then launched his attack. Naturally, he was already mentally prepared before he threw out this broken saber. Furthermore, his body harbored millions and millions of powers of dimension, making him incredibly resistant to oppressive auras. He had discovered this fact back when he opened the stone, but he had intentionally put on a ruse to hide his true abilities. He hadn't been thinking too hard about it back then. He simply hadn't wanted to reveal his strength. Little had he known, it had resulted in him successfully trapping the four great heavenly venerates. Peng! He crushed the six heavens heavenly venerate's skull with a single punch. Then, as he turned around, he smashed the purple flames heavenly venerate's skull in with his knee, utterly destroying the latter's mind in the process. He wasn't done yet. He retracted his hand and leg, and then struck out again with both simultaneously. Peng! Peng! Both the four sides heavenly venerates and grey space heavenly venerate's skull were smashed. Ling Han wasn't intentionally trying to make things so bloody, but he didn't have a choice. A heavenly venerate could only be killed by destroying their mind. Shua. He wrapped the broken saber back in the layers of stone. Even though he had a strong resistance to the murderous aura emitted by this broken saber, he still felt some of its effects. It was just that he could withstand it better than a normal fourth tier. His movements were very practiced, throwing out the saber, killing, and then cleaning up, all in a single breath. As Ling Han finished, Yu Chengwang was in such shock that he stood up from his chair, his face twitching uncontrollably. Heavenly venerates were individuals that wouldn't even balk at the destruction of an entire realm. However, the scene before him was simply too shocking. 5 fourth-tier heavenly venerates practically perished in an instant. How could he possibly accept such a thing? How could he possibly remain calm? Ling Han looked at Yu Chengwang silently. Yu Chengwang couldn't stop himself from gulping, as he felt sweat dripping from his forehead. He could sense the pressure of death coming down on him, but under Ling Han's stoic gaze, he didn't dare move a single muscle. Otherwise, he would surely fall on the receiving end of Ling Han's swift attacks, and end up the same way as those 5 heavenly venerates. Ling Han, my father is a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. It's not too late for you to cease and desist, he warned Ling Han. He felt great shame to the point of wanting to kill himself as the words left his mouth. He was still a 3rd-tier heavenly venerate, an all-powerful existence in any medium-level dimension. Even in the flaming frost realm, he would stand amongst the strongest of elites. But now, he was forced to use his father's name to try and scare someone else just so that he would have a chance to survive. Shameful. It was much too shameful. Ling Han walked towards Yu Chengwang, and casually said, "Sure, I don't mind sparing your pitiful life." Yu Chengwang felt a sense of relief, despite being utterly displeased with how Ling Han had called him pitiful. However, before he even had a chance to fully process it all, he saw Ling Han's iron fist coming straight for him. Pang! His head was instantly crushed. Chapter 2869, 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. Chapter 2869, 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. Why? Yu Chengwang's remnant soul, which hadn't yet dissipated completely, let out an unwilling voice. Didn't Ling Han promise not to kill him? Just kidding, don't take it seriously, Ling Han said lightly. Yu Chengwang's remnant soul let out a shrill cry. Despite being reluctant, it could only return to heaven and earth. If he wasn't dead already, he would still be infuriated to death by Ling Han. Ling Han stood upright in midair and glanced around. Here, the sky was filled with yellow sand, and the heaven and earth were so unique that even the eyesight of the heavenly venerate couldn't reach very far. After scanning around, he said, "Listen, demons and monsters, I will stay here for 10 days. If anyone wants to make a move, I will definitely oblige you for a battle." After speaking, he just sat down cross-legged. This was so domineering. In the distance, the figures of heavenly venerates loomed. Yu Chengwang and the others were interested in the treasures belonging to Ling Han, so how could other people's hearts actually be at peace? Naturally, that was impossible. Yu Chengwang and the others had merely moved first, while the others were simply waiting and observing. It was inevitable that a huge battle would be set off. However, no one thought that the battle between Ling Han and Yu Chengwang would end so quickly. Moreover, it was a complete victory for Ling Han, with him absolutely crushing the other party without sustaining any injury at all. Facing such a terrifying opponent, who would dare to step out and be targeted? However, only Ling Han knew that he had had no other option. It was due to the fact that he possessed a special ability. After killing a heavenly venerate, he would absorb the life essence of the other party. Remember, he had killed 6 heavenly venerates in one go just now, with 5 of them having already advanced to the 4th tier. Thus, their life essences gushed into his body all at once, making him feel like he was about to explode. The infinite powers of dimension were like a millstone, crushing these life essences and turning them into energy that Ling Han could absorb, improving his cultivation level at a terrifying speed. Yet on the other hand, this power was too terrifying, and the rush of power caused him indescribable pain. One had to know that despite him having insta-killed these opponents, there was actually a trick to it. In terms of real battle prowess, the highest North Heavenly Venerate and Purple Flames Heavenly Venerate were not much inferior to Ling Han, and it was merely that the Heavenly Venerable Seals that Ling Han had mastered were much more impressive. Additionally, with the assistance of the Broken Saber, all that allowed him to create a miracle. However, these Heavenly Venerates exploded, and the life essences gushed into his body. He was actually being filled to the brim, to the point of nearly exploding. The pain was so difficult to bear that he had to use all his power to suppress it. Ling Han forcibly suppressed that feeling of pain. Should he show even the slightest hint of being in pain, perhaps some daring person would make a move against him, and then would immediately be able to confirm his real condition. Although Ling Han would still have the help of the Empress and Hu Niu, the strength of the 2 women was only at the 3rd tier, and fighting against a fourth tier would surely be a disastrous situation for them. Therefore, Ling Han had no choice but to take a risk, and sat down domineeringly just like that. On the contrary, it made people unable to ascertain his depth and real condition. Inside his body, his cultivation level was skyrocketing. As expected of a fourth tier, the power was extremely powerful indeed, so much that the energy being transformed was overwhelmingly abundant. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time passed continuously, and soon the 10 days' time was up. Ling Han didn't stand up. He realized that he had still underestimated the energy of the 6 heavenly venerates, especially the 5 fourth-tier heavenly venerates. He wasn't able to fully absorb the energy in 10 days, so he still couldn't stand up. He continued to sit and refine the energy, but this made other heavenly venerates develop other ideas. The 10-day period is up, why hasn't he left yet? Did he think that wasn't enough display of his might, and still intend to continue intimidating us? What an arrogant guy. But is there a possibility that something is wrong with him? It isn't an impossibility. It would be absolutely impossible to kill 5 elites of comparable strength in one go without paying a little price. Hiss, then this guy was deliberately being intimidating before, but he was actually in the process of healing? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. If this had been true, then they might have missed a great opportunity. Perhaps, right now he still hasn't recovered yet. Hehe, why don't you go up and test it out? Many people were speculating that Ling Han still might not have recovered his battle prowess, but who would dare to give it a try? Hadn't they seen the fate of the Purple Flames, Heavenly Venerate and the others? If, by any chance, Ling Han was deliberately setting a trap, and trying to lure out those who wanted to kill him, then wouldn't that be walking right into his trap? Thus, many people were getting restless, but stayed still. The more people there were, the more their hearts wouldn't be united. Perhaps if there was only one person, he would grit his teeth and get on with it. Yet right now, you were looking at me, and I was looking at you. No one wanted to pave the way for others, so the opportunity was wasted just like that. Just like this, another 7 days passed by in a flash. Ling Han's body moved, and he stood up. He had finally refined all the life essences of the heavenly venerates. Not only had he regained his battle prowess, but his battle prowess had also further increased by another notch due to the fact that his cultivation level had advanced to the late stage of the 2nd tier. All of you, Ling Han swept a gaze around and shook his head. Have missed a great opportunity. I did lose my battle prowess previously, and should anyone have made a move, I'd have been unable to stop it. Well, for the sake of you being so obedient, I will spare you this once. He laughed and walked away. This was too arrogant. Everyone was furious. It turned out that they had really fallen into Ling Han's empty fort strategy. But since he had succeeded, then fine. Why did he still need to say it out loud and mock others? Damn, it was too detestable of him. Yet they hadn't dared to make a move before, let alone now. Who else with cultivation level below 5th tier could take down Ling Han? Unless it was the strongest prodigies such as Lin Yolian and Xin Chihu. Xin Chihu will definitely not spare Ling Han. That's right. He killed Xin Chihu's servant. Although he was merely a celestial king, who is Xin Chihu? He's someone who would never accept such humiliation. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Everyone comforted themselves in this way. Ling Han was doomed to die anyway, so why should they take action? Ling Han returned to the base. Upon returning, he handed the broken saber to Zhu Heng, while Lin Xiaoyang and Chu Hao both went to find new veins of ore. Zhu Heng immediately said that this was definitely not the precious tool of a 6th tier, but rather belonged to a 7th tier as he himself couldn't forge this kind of precious tool. Astonishingly, 2 7th tier items had appeared here. However, the 7th tier was immortal, and now the corpse of a 7th tier and a broken weapon of a 7th tier were found. Ultimately, whose hands had caused this? Zhu Heng thought for a while before saying, theoretically speaking, a 7th tier can die. However, it's not like being killed by someone, but rather that he can collapse his mind himself. Even if the physical body is immortal, what remains will just be a dead soul. Ling Han nodded. A 7th tier couldn't be killed, because the body was too strong, and there wasn't any kind of power that could penetrate it, so it was naturally indestructible, but suicide would be an entirely different matter. But, does a seventh tier have a reason to commit suicide? This was the critical point. Which seventh tier would commit suicide? Could one have cultivated himself into an idiot? Ling Han looked at Ju Heng, while Ju Heng also looked at him. They couldn't figure out why a seventh tier would commit suicide. This dimension is much more complicated than we have imagined, and, quite possibly, hiding some world-shaking secret, Ju Heng said. Indeed, only this dimension had heavenly venerable stone, and could also produce great herbs that could be used by even heavenly venerates and even heavenly venerable seals. It should be known that heavenly venerates were hated by the heaven and earth, so how could the heaven and earth produce heavenly venerable seals to help the heavenly venerates? Not much consideration had been given to this matter before, because it was a wonderful thing, but when the seventh tier corpse was found, everything became weird. Chapter 2870, 2879th grade seals all completed. Chapter 2870, 2879th grade seals all completed. 2879th grade seals all completed. There's a problem now, Ling Han said. This dimension. Is it a part of the Genesis world? There was a seventh tier heavenly venerate here. Though it was only a corpse, it did prove that there had once been a seventh tier heavenly venerate here, which meant that this dimension was a transcendent dimension. However, why weren't there any historical records of this dimension? It had been devoured by hysteria. Apologies, that would mean there wouldn't be the slightest bit left of it. It would definitely not be like how it was like now. But what kind of power could destroy a transcendent dimension, then? Could it be accomplished by a seventh tier? There was a thick layer of mystery around it, and this was utterly baffling. This world is too big, and there is heavenly venerable stone that is capable of cutting off divine sense at that. To explore it completely, it would take much too long, Ju Heng mused ruefully. Ling Han nodded. I plan to walk around and explore this dimension for a bit. That's good. Ju Heng nodded. Just cultivating behind closed doors in seclusion would not produce a seventh tier. However, Ling Han still went into seclusion first, mastering the two newly obtained heavenly venerable seals. In this way, the number of seals he had mastered had already reached as many as 113. Merely in terms of numbers, there were probably not many that could compare to him. Next, he would have to think about increasing the number of heavenly venerable seals. In that case, he would have to seek out heavenly venerable stone mines himself. What raw stone lane would welcome him? Just look at those real grandmasters of raw stone, who among them would appear in a raw stone lane? For those like Niu Buchuan and Bao Fengyu, they were only second-grade characters, only understanding and comprehending partially, and had only been lucky, unlike Grandmaster Shenlai, who was really capable of picking out treasures. Ling Han set out with the Empress and Hu Niu. This time, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing did not follow him. Mainly, it was because Fu Tianxing was about to advance to the heavenly venerable tier, so Ling Shi wanted to accompany him as he traveled to various dimensions, extracting the power of dimension from each dimension. Because there were not so many newly formed small worlds that were ready for plucking, Fu Tianxing did not walk the path that Ling Shi had taken, but rather emulated Ling Han and the Empress. As for whether he could break through his shackles, surpassing the Empress and being like Ling Han, that would have to depend on Fu Tianxing himself. Ling Han and company set out. They had no aim, and were simply roaming the mountains and plains here, searching for fated opportunities there, as well as trying to find the lost history. Just what exactly had destroyed this dimension? The answer could possibly have very serious implications. As they traveled, Ling Han spread out his divine sense, searching for veins of ore. Actually, it was easy to explore a mine. Every heavenly venerate was capable of that because the unique trait of heavenly venerable stone was cutting off divine sense, so one only had to spread out their divine sense and see where it encountered a large-scale barrier. In the latter case, there had to be a vein of heavenly venerable stone or laid out ahead of them, or beneath the spot. However, finding veins of ore and finding good veins of ore were completely two different matters. There were really too many veins of ore here, but the majority of them were useless. All they contained was scrap stone. Hence, one would need a grandmaster of raw stone to assess and evaluate if this vein of ore was valuable enough to excavate and open up. After all, even if one had great power, there would be no way to apply this great strength in something like opening a mine. One had to carefully and cautiously dig. If there really was treasure, such as a great herb, it could be very easily damaged. It was even more convenient for Ling Han. With a sweep of divine sense, he could clearly see what was contained inside the vein of ore. However, the larger the vein of ore, the more time he would need. Just like how most raw stones turned out to be scrap stones, it was the same for veins of ore. The biggest part of it would be blank, so it was not that easy to achieve results. A whole 30 years later, Ling Han finally discovered a small vein of ore which contained treasure. His speed of excavating the vein was astonishing because he knew the spots which contained treasure and the spots that contained nothing. He could completely bulldoze forward, unleashing the full power of a heavenly venerate. Hence, after only half a year, he had completely emptied out this vein of ore. He obtained 7 heavenly venerable seals, 3 great herbs, and even more divine metal, almost enough to fill a spatial tool completely. He gave 1 heavenly venerable seal to the Empress and Hu Niu, respectively. The 3 of them had reached an agreement. Ling Han would first gather the 999 heavenly venerable seals, and if he encountered any duplicates, only then would they be given to the 2 women. Hence, these 2 seals naturally were seals that Ling Han already possessed. Another 60 to 80 years passed, and Ling Han's harvest was increasing, but it was also harder and harder to achieve results. Every force would be recruiting or nurturing their own grandmasters of raw stone, and they would be exploring and digging veins of ore all over the world, so there were fewer and fewer valuable veins of ore. Ling Han showed a hint of pleasant surprise. "What is it?" "Found something," the Empress asked. Ling Han smiled and nodded. "I really did." This was a vein of ore that had already been abandoned. Ling Han was simply trying his luck, yet discovered that there really was something that was contained inside this vein of ore. However, this vein of ore was huge, but there were actually just 3 heavenly venerable seals inside. Everything else was just scrap stone. It was no wonder that it would be abandoned. They couldn't even be bothered to excavate it. There was no need to waste this time. Ling Han dug out those 3 heavenly venerable seals, and after refining and mastering them, he couldn't help but look overjoyed. In his mind, 111 seals were glowing at the same time, resonating with one another, and causing his powers of dimension to surge majestically, especially those powers of dimension extracted from low-level dimensions. The speed of their growth was shockingly rapid. This was, having gathered the whole set of 9th-grade seals. Ling Han laughed loudly. Perhaps he was the first person in the world to have gathered so many combination seals. When the Empress and Hu Niu found out, they naturally were happy for him, and very curious as well. Just how much can they boost battle prowess? Ling Han attempted to channel these seals. Instantly, his whole body was glowing, exuding an indescribable majesty. He threw a punch. Peng, peng, peng. Space shattered violently, and the ground was destroyed and crumbled. Even the restraints of this dimension had been opened, with endless void energy surging in. This was both because the might of his punch was too terrifying, and because this dimension was dead. Without the suppression and balance from the power of heaven and earth, it was too easy to destroy it. 222 times. Ling Han exclaimed in pleasant surprise. 111 heavenly venerable seals could increase battle prowess by 222 times after they were combined. It might seem as if every single seal had only doubled the power, which was not amazing, but it should be known that these seals originally could not be superimposed. Now, I am confident that I can overwhelm all other 4th tiers. Ling Han broke into a grin. If he were to battle the highest North Heavenly Venerate and the others again now, he would not need to defeat them one at a time at all, nor would there be any need for him to use that broken saber. He would only have to confront them with a full offensive, and it would be an overwhelming victory. This is just the 9th-grade seals. If I could combine all the 1st-grade seals, just how much could they boost my battle prowess? Furthermore, if all 999 heavenly venerable seals could be combined, Just how terrifying would that be? Ling Han was curious, and even more so expectant. Would it be so violent that even my body would not be able to sustain it, he thought. This was not impossible. If all the heavenly venerable seals were combined, it could increase his power by 10,000, 100,000, or even more. It was absolutely normal that his body would not be able to sustain his kind of great power. Let's continue forward. They began searching again, but the mountains on the surface had more or less been completely explored and searched by the various great forces. If they wanted to find any veins of ore now, they would have to go deeper underground. Ling Han and company thus set out on this path. They explored and searched beneath ground, and after a great many years, they actually entered a cave. This place was not naturally formed, but rather manually dug out. The traces are still very new, Ling Han assessed. Someone has surpassed us, and is now ahead of us. Chapter 2871, 2871 Venturing Deep Underground. Chapter 2871, 2871 Venturing Deep Underground. 2871 Venturing Deep Underground. The competition now was extremely fierce. The veins of ore on ground level had already been more or less distributed, and the few remaining veins of ore were also being fought over by the various forces, which resulted in great conflicts. This situation was destined to create rivers of blood, and even heavenly venerates could not be detached from it. Hence, some forces had directed their attention beneath the ground. Perhaps there would be some places deeper underground that also possessed veins of ore. However, if veins of ore were really discovered underground, the difficulty of excavating them would also be much higher because the further underground it was, the greater the pressure would be. There were also terrifying levels of heat that even a ninth heaven celestial king would frown at there. If that really was the case, then the only course of action was for heavenly venerates to step forth personally. Let's go, let's go, let's go, Hunyo urged. The three of them were not the type to be afraid of trouble. Moreover, something like a vein of ore did not belong to anyone. It was definitely not a matter of first come, first served, but rather depended on strength. The three of them continued onwards. This passage was shockingly extensive, and when they reached a certain point, the heat here also reached a considerably high temperature. It was not manifested from the regulations of fire. Firstly, that would not be able to affect heavenly venerates, and even ninth heaven celestial kings could easily withstand such heat, and secondly, the heaven and earth of this place had long since died, so how could there possibly still be any regulations existing? This heat was because the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world were endlessly clashing and conflicting, which created such high temperatures, and this kind of heat was definitely not something that could be withstood by power of regulation. Hence, even a ninth heaven would find it difficult to endure this. Barging in forcefully would only result in them being burned into ash. Ling Han and the others naturally were unafraid. Their strength was too great. Mere heat generated from the friction of fundamental particles was far from capable of making them feel wary. However, after they delved deeper, it was not only the high heat that was scorching, there were also flames wafting here and there. This was the display of even more intense clash and friction of fundamental particles, and even Ling Han and the others did not dare try to withstand the flames with their bodies. They would be throwing punches, delivering palm strikes, or using their heavenly venerate tools to send these flames flying or snuffing them out. If it was a first tier, they would only be able to dodge when they encounter this kind of flames, Ling Han said. A first tier had only mastered the unique power of a specific dimension, but if they came here, they would actually not be much stronger than a ninth heaven, because this was a dead place. There was no unique power here or regulations for them to extract at all. When the power stored inside their body was completely exhausted, their battle prowess would decline drastically. There were also unique stones as well as crystals here, but they did not have any value for cultivation. Ling Han examined them closely, and deduced that these were only the end products of being tempered by the fundamental powers. The people ahead of them did not just have a small lead. Though Ling Han and the others were moving very quickly, they had still not managed to catch up with the people in front of them even after over a dozen days had passed, and it was unknown how far deep underground they had ventured. This was a dead dimension, and could not possibly nurture any mysterious space. It only had so many layers, after all. At most, we should be able to reach the land's heart in 7 days, Ling Han estimated. In a real dimension, a core existed, and had great value, but would this dimension have a core? It should have long since been destroyed, the Empress said. After all, this dimension has long since died, and the core is the source of power for the whole dimension, just like the heart of a human being. It should have long since stopped functioning. Perhaps there are still some remaining shards? Hunyo asked, clapping her hands. Let's quickly go and snatch it. Even a dead core of dimension would have great value, especially when this dimension had once been a transcendent dimension. Its value should be immeasurable. Ling Han nodded. Then let's speed up. They increased their speed, and forged on at full speed. Another 5 days passed, and they finally could sense some life ahead of them. Aside from outsiders, it was impossible for there to be any local residents here. They had caught up with them. The 3 of them exchanged looks, and they immediately discovered that the people ahead of them had also stopped, and were no longer moving. Clearly, the other side had also discovered their presence. Let's meet them. Ling Han walked ahead, and after walking for another while, 7 people appeared ahead of them, as expected. The 7 of them looked to be of varying age, having both men and women, but every single one of them was exuding the unique aura of an elite. All of them were heavenly venerates, and the weakest was a 1st tier, while the highest should be a 4th tier. After all, Ling Han was only a 2nd tier heavenly venerate, and being able to match a 4th tier did not mean that he could see through to the depths of a 4th tier. Scram! The 7 people on the other side had also spotted Ling Han and the others. When they discovered that the strongest among them was only a 3rd tier, a youth in black robes immediately called out to them coldly. It was just a 3rd tier, and he actually gave them a scare. Little Hu, watch your words, an elder in red robes reprimanded. He chuckled. Please don't take it to heart. This brat has just advanced to the heavenly venerable tier not too long ago, so he is quite proud. It is inevitable that he would be a little condescending and arrogant. It's fine, Ling Han said smilingly. He glanced at the youth in black robes, and mentally noted down that he was going to beat up this guy. The elder in red robes continued, we are close to the land's heart by now. Why don't we go together so we can watch out for one another? In the eyes of others, this was a very good thing. An elite that was at least 4th tier was earnestly inviting them to go with them. Wouldn't that mean that they now had a protective talisman? Ling Han also smiled. Though this is a dead dimension, it has once been a transcendent dimension, after all. It is possible that the core of the dimension will still have tremendous might, and will be extremely dangerous. Precisely. Hence, it is even more necessary for the 3 of you to cooperate with me. The elder in red robes laughed loudly. Ling Han shook his head. How would I know that Senior truly wants to protect us, or is using us as scouts to test the dangers that lie ahead? The elder in red robes faltered, and then laughed loudly. Brat, you are very clever. Thank you for the praise, Senior. Ling Han appeared very modest. However, you have become a victim of your own cleverness. The expression of the elder in red robes became sinister. Since you have already predicted that, I can't be bothered to waste any more words, either. Just scout out the way in front of us obediently. And if I refuse? Ling Han asked. Then your only path is death. These words were not spoken by the elder in red robes, but rather by a woman in purple robes. She was very beautiful, but compared to the Empress and Hunyo, her beauty was far too inferior. In the world of today, the deaths of a few heavenly venerates would not be worth much at all, a sturdy man of broad build commented calmly, as if he was offering a reminder, which was also a threat at the same time. Ling Han laughed. Aren't you guys afraid that I have a father who's a 6th tier or 7th tier? Do you? The woman in purple robes demanded disdainfully, her expression extremely harsh and unkind. Ling Han shook his head. No. But my grandfather. What about your grandfather? The sturdy man asked, his expression slightly serious. If Ling Han really had a grandfather who was a 6th tier or 7th tier, then they would have to treat him seriously. Even if they wanted to kill him, they had to make sure that it was done secretly and soundlessly. Not the slightest bit of news could be allowed to leak out at all. His grandfather is not a 6th tier or 7th tier, either, but has rather died long ago. Hunyo giggled. Fuck, are you guys playing around with us? Without waiting for the 7 of them to react, the Empress's mischievous nature was completely stoked as well, and she began, but our master. What about your master? He is a 3rd tier, Ling Han said smilingly. The 7 people on the other side exchanged looks, and were all outraged. You guys are really too arrogant, aren't you? Even now, you people still dare to make empty boasts and tease us. You're going to regret refusing us. The sturdy man stepped out. He was a 3rd tier, and he was certain he alone would be able to suppress Ling Han and the others. Let me. The Empress took a step forward. Let Nyo deal with it. Hunyo hurriedly stepped forward as well. She wanted to compete with the Empress all the time. Chapter 2872, 2872 Scouts. Chapter 2872, 2872 Scouts. 2872 Scouts. You people can attack together, the sturdy man said carelessly. He was a 3rd tier, and on the other side, there was a 3rd tier and a 2nd tier in truth. With the gap of a cultivation level, and without a large enough number of 2nd tiers, they were all trash in front of a 3rd tier. Hence, while it looked like he was fighting 2 people at the same time, it was actually more of a one-on-one battle. Ugly, you were the one who said it, Hunyo said. Make your move, the sturdy man stated evenly, appearing to be absolutely confident. The reason why he had said so much nonsense was naturally because both Hunyo and the Empress were too beautiful. Even if he did not have any ideas in that direction, admiring this kind of beautiful women for a while longer was still enjoyable. Hunyo turned, and said to the Empress, "Let's beat him up." The Empress nodded. Though they frequently argued and fought, whenever they were faced with an external enemy, they naturally would join forces against this external foe. Show. The 2 women rushed out simultaneously, blasting towards the sturdy man. Peng, peng, peng. The 2 women unleashed their full battle prowess, their bodies surging with boundless light that crushed the ground all around them. Expanses of the ground crumbled, but they could not collapse at all, as they were turned into dust by their combined power. Heavenly venerable seals were flickering on their bodies, greatly boosting their power. The Empress had a heavenly venerable seal that she had created herself which was capable of boosting her power by 22 times, and though Hunyo did not have such good luck, Ling Han had also unearthed a raw stone, giving her a 7th grade seal which could multiply her power 24 times. This naturally was terrifying. The 2 women rushed forwards, possessing the dominating aura that seemed capable of destroying everything. The sturdy man involuntarily paled. Hunyo's battle prowess had already exceeded his expectations, but that was still reasonable. After all, if he was inferior in terms of heavenly venerable seals, that was only a matter of luck. Furthermore, it was not like there wasn't a chance for him to make up for the difference in the future. But the Empress's strength was inconceivable. She was a 2nd tier heavenly venerate. No matter what kind of heavenly venerable seal she was using as a boost, she should not be so powerful. This battle prowess was not inferior to a 3rd tier's at all, so wasn't it ridiculous? He was stunned, yet he had no choice but to react. He punched out both fists, meeting the oncoming attacks from the 2 women. "Don't," the elder in red robes hurriedly called out. He was a 4th tier, so he naturally could see more clearly. Hunyo's and the Empress's battle prowess had both already reached the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Even one of them alone was not someone that the sturdy man could handle by himself, what more when it was their combined power. If he faced them head-on, he would only be seeking his own suffering. Unfortunately, his words came too late. With how fast heavenly venerates were moving, their attacks would already be delivered with a mere thought. Boom! The power of the 3 of them clashed forcefully, causing a resounding explosion, and the sturdy man was sent flying like a cannonball. Peng, peng, peng. Originally, there had been no further path ahead of them, yet this sturdy man had forcefully opened up more of the path. He was a heavenly venerate, with tough skin and a powerful body. Tempered by the fundamental powers, the body of a heavenly venerate was extremely durable. The elder in red robes and his companions all turned their heads, and saw that the sturdy man had finally stopped. He was lying on the ground, head drooping, as if he was a corpse. Thankfully, he had only been knocked out from the impact. How could a third tier die so easily? The elder in red robes could see very clearly. If that sturdy man had not been so careless, confronting the two head-on, he definitely would not have lost so quickly. However, he wanted to clash with force, even when his strength was not enough. In that case, there was naturally no need to wonder about the results. The elder sneered. "You do have some strength. No wonder you dared to even look down on me." However, a third tier is only a third tier, after all. In front of me, the three of you will not be able to endure even a single finger. Old geezer, then let us test the might of this finger of yours, Hunyo declared, clapping her hands, and looking completely naive and innocent. "I'll oblige you." The elder in red robes moved. Wang, he indeed flicked out a finer. Peng, peng, peng. This passage had already been enlarged countless times with that strike previously, but the attack of a fourth tier was naturally even more terrifying, causing this space to again begin to collapse. Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyo called out simultaneously. At this time, it was naturally their husband's turn to step out. There was no need for them to call out. Ling Han had already moved. Otherwise, how could he have made it in time? He rushed out, and was already standing in front of the two women, also tapping out a finger himself. Boom! The two powers clashed, instantly causing a frightening explosion. The fundamental particles here were ignited, forming a rolling wave of power which radiated in all directions. Peng, peng, peng. The woman in purple robes and the others, along with the sturdy man who had already passed out, were all dragged into the power wave. They were instantly tossed out several dozen kilometers away. The battle prowess of the fourth tier was too powerful. The elder in red robes showed a hint of surprise. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually really take this attack from him head-on. His eyes involuntarily narrowed. This was too freakish, wasn't it? A second tier was capable of matching a fourth tier. To say nothing of how no one else would believe this, even when he himself had seen it with his own eyes and experienced it personally, he had an abrupt feeling of absolute shock and disbelief. If it were not for the fact that it was he himself who had attacked, he would really suspect that this fourth tier had deliberately held back. "Old geezer, your finger doesn't seem all that powerful," Hunyo deliberately mocked the red-robed old man. Both she and the Empress were standing behind Ling Han, so they naturally would not be affected by the shockwave. The elder in red robes had no response to that. A fourth tier should be capable of completely crushing a second and third tier, but the both of them had tied with this exchange of blows. What else could he say? "Senior, since you are so willing to guide and support your juniors, why don't you open the way ahead of us then?" Ling Han asked smilingly. The expression of the elder in red robes darkened involuntarily. He had previously said that he wanted to protect Ling Han and his group, but actually wanted Ling Han and the others to scout out the way ahead of them. After all, approaching the core of a dimension was an extremely dangerous task. And now Ling Han had actually turned around to demand he scouted out the way for them. This was really a turning of the wheel of fortune. The elder's eyes were cold. "Junior, you have thought too much. Is that right?" Ling Han's figure moved, and charged towards the elder in red robes. Since the latter was unwilling, then he would beat him into submission. "How dare you?" the elder in red robes shouted coldly. "Don't think that you really are capable of standing against a fourth tier just because you possess power capable of matching fourth tier. These are two completely different matters." Wang. He channeled a heavenly venerable seal. This was a seal that he had developed when he had reached fourth tier, and he had spent about 3 epochs on it. Instantly, his power soared more than a dozen times over. Ling Han laughed loudly, and channeled a 7th grade seal. Instantly, his power increased by over 20 times. Not only was his battle prowess not inferior to that of the elder in red robes, he had an advantage instead. The elder in red robes was shocked. How could a guy that did not have the backing of a 6th or 7th tier heavenly venerate be capable of mastering a 7th grade heavenly venerable seal? This was surreal. Ling Han threw a barrage of punches, clashing with the elder in red robes head-on. After sustaining a few blows, the elder in red robes could no longer endure it, as Ling Han punched him madly like a punching bag. Peng, peng, peng. His figure slid backwards, as if he was further expanding this passageway. The elder in red robes forced himself to stop, and had not even gotten his breath back when Ling Han attacked him again. It was another series of punches sent his way, blasting him backwards repeatedly, and opening up more of the passage. Understanding finally dawned on him. Ling Han was doing this on purpose. He was using him like a human probe, testing out all the possible dangers that they might encounter on their way. Fuck, this guy was too merciless. The elder in red robes was fuming with fury. He was a 4th-tier elite, and he had actually fallen to the point of being a lowly scout. He wanted to commit murder. Arg. Peng. Ling Han's fist landed on his nose, instantly creating a stream of blood. The anger that had just arisen in him moments ago had also disappeared without a trace. Chapter 2873, 2873 Yet Another Dimension. Chapter 2873, 2873 Yet Another Dimension. 2873 Yet Another Dimension. The elder in red robes was extremely furious. He had never suffered such a great humiliation before, and it made him want to commit murder. However, as Ling Han's punches landed on his face one after another, the chill in his heart grew endlessly. He was no match for this young man. In this world, no matter how great the heaven and earth was, or how great the logic was, it was not more important than strength. Whoever was stronger would be able to crush all living beings and do whatever they wanted. Thus, his anger and defiance were all fake. If he continued to fight head-on like this, he would be done for. Furthermore, after calming down, he discovered that Ling Han was not only stronger than him in terms of heavenly venerable seals, but he also had the upper hand in terms of raw power. The elder's power was roughly at the middle stage of the 4th tier, but Ling Han was at the late stage of the 4th tier. Therefore, with the amplification of the heavenly venerable seals, the difference in battle prowess between the two of them became even greater. Peng. Before he could finish his thought, he was sent flying again. Peng, peng, peng. Under the terrifying pressure, he destroyed an unknown amount of ground layers along the way with the impact. He was greatly alarmed. They had already been close to the land's heart, and now that they were so deep underground, it was likely that a hollow would appear at any moment, revealing the core of the dimension. The core of a transcendent dimension was incomparably terrifying, and even 7th tiers couldn't retrieve it. Now, even if this core had already been destroyed, just like how a dying tiger would still be mighty, perhaps 4th tier cultivators could still be killed by it. If he really died like this, he wouldn't be able to accept it even if he became a ghost. It would be too unfair to him. Junior, we can talk peacefully. Peng. He hadn't even finished speaking when he was already struck by another punch from Ling Han. His body involuntarily flew backwards. Peng, peng, peng. Like a sharp spear, nothing could stop his advance as he sank deeper and deeper into the ground. All of a sudden, he felt a lightness behind him. There was actually no ground layer blocking him. He was first taken aback, then shocked. He suddenly realized that they had probably reached the core of the dimension. All of a sudden, the hair on his body stood on ends. However, he immediately revealed a look of surprise. How was this the core of the dimension? It was a completely new world. Peng. Ling Han also followed closely behind, similarly revealing a look of surprise. He had actually entered a new world. There were mountains, great rivers, and seas here, but all of them were dried up now, leaving behind one massive depression after another, grains of sand filling the air. Strange, too strange. There was no dimensional core here. Although it did disappoint Ling Han, he wouldn't be too concerned. After all, countless years had passed, so it was normal for the dimensional core to be destroyed. However, the scene in front of him now was too shocking. He couldn't care less about the elder in red robes now. He unleashed his divine sense to probe this world. Husband. The Empress and Hunyo also appeared, their faces also showing surprise. What kind of place was this? Ling Han's expression became solemn, and he said, "This is a dimension. Aren't we presently in this primitive dimension?" Hunyou asked in confusion. Ling Han shook his head and said, "This dimension is different from that dimension." "You're saying that these are two dimensions?" Understanding dawned on the Empress, and her expression also became solemn. "There's such a strange thing." Hunyou was also stunned, and she tilted her head. Dimensions are isolated from dimensions, and a two-realm passageway can connect two dimensions, but is this considered a two-realm passageway? Ling Han shook his head and said, "This is definitely not a two-realm passageway." They had traveled through the two-realm passageways of the whole Genesis world. It could be said that they were extremely familiar with two-realm passageways, but this was definitely not the case now. "But I'm certain that this is definitely not a transcendent dimension," Ling Han concluded. "It's definitely two different dimensions." The three of them looked at each other, and gradually came to a conclusion. Could it be that a supreme elite made a move and forcibly compressed the two dimensions together? The Empress muttered to herself, even a seventh-tier elite would not be able to compress transcendent dimensions together. At the very least, a single seventh-tier elite could not. Ling Han nodded. The two dimensions overlapped. Was this natural or man-made? If it was man-made, what kind of mighty power would be needed to achieve this? He knew that this dimension definitely possessed astonishing secrets, but this scene still far exceeded his imagination. On the other side, the elder in red robes also slowly came to his senses. It was actually easier for him than Ling Han to confirm this because he was in the fourth tier, and had been in contact with three types of fundamental powers. He could say with certainty that the three fundamental powers he mastered were clearly weaker here. Previously, the primitive dimension was a transcendent dimension, but this was a high-level dimension. There was an entire level of difference. He racked his brains, but no matter how hard he thought, he could not figure out how this could have happened. A new dimension, does that mean there would be new veins of ore here? The Empress's eyes lit up. She actually wasn't the type to be very curious, because she didn't care at all, so she immediately thought of something else. Ling Han was also delighted. This was a new dimension. Since he couldn't figure it out, there was no point in thinking about it. He looked at the elder in red robes. In that instant, he felt an urge to kill him to ensure his silence. The elder in red robes couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine, and he hurriedly broke into a run and fled. Heavenly Venerable tier elites were hard to kill, especially when they were of the same cultivation level. As long as one of them fled first, it was simply impossible for their opponent to catch up to them. Ling Han did not give chase. Since two groups of people had already entered this place, it meant that there were many people who had their sights set on the underground. It was possible that other forces had already entered this dimension from different entrances. Let's make the first move. They immediately began their exploration, searching for veins of ore. The result didn't disappoint them. Very quickly, they found a vein of ore, and within it were 3 heavenly venerable seals. However, Ling Han had already mastered these 3, so he let the Empress and Hunyou divide these seals between themselves. They continued to advance. They had to hurry up. Otherwise, when the various great forces focused their attention on them, this place would become just like the dimension above ground, where the resources would be quickly divided up among the major forces. Time flew by. After tens of thousands of years, this place gradually became lively, and more forces came here. Ling Han and the others silently made a fortune. They were the first batch of people to enter this place, and Ling Han's ability to detect new veins of ore was so powerful. With this head start, it allowed them to make a fortune. Here's another vein of ore, Ling Han said. They were currently in a dried-up sea. Originally, this place was an oceanic trench, and it was extremely deep. Hurry up and dig, Hunyou urged. Ling Han smiled, and used his great ability to directly extract the entire vein of ore, and then divided it in half, extracting whatever valuable objects there were. Chem. He suddenly frowned. What is it? The Empress asked. Someone's coming. He's very strong, Ling Han said, looking into the distance. Shio. A figure came from the horizon, emitting a terrifying aura, as if even the heavens had to bow in submission. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. Meng Dong. Shockingly, the newcomer was Meng Dong. He had fought Meng Dong before. Although Meng Dong had admitted defeat in the end, he had not actually lost. This was a powerful opponent. Little brother, we meet again. Meng Dong stopped and nodded at Ling Han. Now you know who I am, right? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.